Soft and system size to sales. Today, I've got my good friend here on my left, maybe his right. Anyway, it's the wrong way round. Shay Lynch, and today we're going to be speaking about emotional intelligence within sales. Hey, welcome everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you today about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence in sales is such a big topic now, and it's been talked about for a while now. And I think if you're ever going to succeed within sales, one of the core things that you should have or look into is emotional intelligence. It's such a vast range of really good adaptable skills to have, and it covers such a big area. So Shay, let's start speaking about this, because I think it's a massive topic. What's your take on it within sales? How would you see it?
Well, first and foremost, I totally agree, Jason. First and foremost, that it is absolutely a foundational skill that you need for sales. If you don't know it, and if you're a sales manager or your teams don't know it, this is one of the first induction training courses they should be put on, Jason, because
Yeah.
it's so important on multiple levels when you're dealing with sales, both internally about learning about yourself, your
Mm,
strengths and weaknesses, so you can do the self-awareness and self-regulation yourself, right? So it's so important to get that bit right. And then also then the social relevance and regulation and awareness with that as well. So there's multiple, Jason, because in sales, there's so many situations when you're dealing with people. You need to know your strengths and weaknesses. You need to know how to control yourself. And then you need to know their personalities and be aware of their needs and be mindful of how situations go. Because Jason, how often do salespeople get rejected? That's first and foremost.
yeah.
You need to learn to deal with rejection. You need to know initially how can you deal with rejection? Because how many times, if you make how many calls, like when you're starting your lead generation process, how often do you get rejected? That's not
Yeah.
an easy thing to take. You need to know you can take this, and they're not always straightforward rejections. Some of them could be angry rejections, leave me alone, like shouting and screaming, conflicts, Jason, negotiations, all these things. You need to know how to self-regulate and
Yeah.
then also be mindful, put yourself in their shoes, and then know how you can regulate the situation by minding yourself. So I think it's foundational and fundamental in order to achieve strong performing results.
Yeah, I totally concur with you on there. And it goes beyond having a wonderful mindset and all of that. And that's talked about a lot. But it's really understanding yourself and how you feel about yourself. And that takes time and effort. I think when you're younger, your emotions are all over the place. But it just takes time to really sort of cement and go, this is who I am. These are my emotions. Recognize when things are going wrong. Recognize the self dialogue that you have within you, because that's the biggest challenge, is to stop you negatively self-talk. The challenge is our fight, flight, or freeze mechanism that we have. It's here to protect us. Back into the olden days when we used to be fighting this, that, and the other, and that would be there to protect us, or we engage. But now it's there, and it's self-talk. It's there to protect us, but it's in the wrong situations, especially in the way we are today as humans. The fight, flight, freeze mechanism is there, but it's understanding it, recognizing it, and using it to your best benefit, and understanding yourself. There's lots of tools out there. to go on Myers-Briggs, and you can get your own personal disc profiles, and there's a flurry of them that you can get your own sales performance profile, how you are and how you deal with certain situations, which is good. And it is wonderful, because then you can actually start recognizing that, and you're recognizing, oh, I might be that sort of person. How can I deal with being that type of person? What do I need to do to recognize that? What do I need to do to understand myself a bit better? Maybe it's a course I need to go, or maybe it's a book I need to read, or maybe it's something else that I can understand. More I can understand myself is better that I can understand other people, because as you've already said, is rejection, self-dialogue in your head. Oh, I'm not very good at this, or whatever it might be, is to say, well, that was just one call. There's another call coming on. So it's how you speak to yourself, and how you regulate yourself to go, well, okay, but that's just one. Let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next. Let's learn from that. What can I do better next time to help me improve and help me get better at what I do?
Yeah, but even Jason, just to extend what you've just talked about there, that self-talk, that, as you said, you could be having a bad day, Jason. Maybe a few things went wrong in the house.
Yeah.
You're distracted. Then you had a few bad calls. You've been given out to by a few potential clients, or even if a customer, if something goes wrong, like you could be going, oh my God, why me? Right. But when you have that negative self-talk, what happens, Jason, with your energy, right? Your outward energy then is compromised. So how you come across to people, and not just physically in front of people, but on the phone, like it affects the tone of voice, it affects your body language, it affects everything. So if you're trying to sell something to somebody and you're saying how amazing it is, but your negative tone, your body language is saying something different, your customers and prospects subconsciously will not get a good feeling. They won't have a good gut feeling about this, and they'll reject you again. So it's so important to regulate that, so then you can be mindful and override anything that you do for every meeting, start from scratch every single time.
Yeah, I think, and well, I don't think, I actually know visualization techniques before a call or before a meeting. As much as you might have had a disastrous day, things have gone wrong, we spoke about problems and challenges in the past. I find, and it's been spoken about loads of times, but it works for me because it's something that I do before I do a training or workshop or a big call or presentation, is I close my eyes and I visualize things going well. I visualize, and after I've practiced and rehearsed and I've done everything I need to do, and all the decks and the slides are going are the way I'd like it, but I do close my eyes for 5 minutes. Number one, to calm myself. Number two, I visualize things going well. I visualize every single aspect of the deck in the presentation, and I visualize my tone, my tonality, and my pace, my rhythm, and how I'm speaking, and then how I'm sitting or how I'm standing, and my posture. All those aspects is practicing, mentally rehearsing before you actually go to the meeting, before you actually pick up the phone, before you do something else. And whether you do it or not, but for me, it works fantastically, and it's been studied, even going back to Napoleon Hill, chapter 3, which is over 100 years ago. He actually did that himself because he studied the most successful people in the world at that particular time. But it's been written about again and again and again and again. And I think it works really wonderfully well. So it's one of the things that you could and should possibly do to enable your mind, your mindset, to direct yourself in the most positive way possible.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic illustration, Jason, because any situation, right? Sales, whether you're going into a meeting, sometimes that could be a negotiation meeting. Sometimes it could be a conflict meeting, Jason. Sometimes you could do a presentation to the board of directors of a major multinational. There's always going to be a stress going into these meetings.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, Jason. What I always talk about, you have the process, like again, with my systems thinking cap on, right? You have the process of what happens within the meeting. So you can create on that journey. But then, as you said, rightly so, what you do before and then also what you do after.
Yeah.
Because you have to manage your energy for good or bad, Jason. So if you know there's a certain type of meeting coming up, what's your routine? What's the thing that you need to do, or multiple things that you need to do before you go into a situation?
Yeah.
And like you, I have my own routine. It involves breathing. It involves like resonance breathing, where you breathe in for 4, out for 6. So that gets the right calming, focused hormones running through your body, not that stress, fight or flight or freeze hormones. And that's a very simple thing I do. Like you, I also visualize success. I think that is uber important. I cannot stress. No, like when you say, and for success, Jason, for me, is not getting the result that you want. Yes, that is the end goal, but success is making sure I've given my best in the meeting. I've done exactly what I did in the format I wanted to do it in, and then it's out of your control. That to me is success, and then it's up to them, because you don't want to manipulate the situation, Jason. No. And I know that's another topic for another day, but it's all about ensuring you walk away from that meeting knowing what you've done, right or wrong. And again, this is, as I said, there's a start before the process, and then post the process, Jason. Then it's how do you reflect? What went well? What didn't? What could have you done better in the meeting? What can you do better next time? And this is the self-awareness and the self-reflection all the time, that then you next time self-regulate. Because, Jason, these meetings, as you know, get heated all the time. Negotiations, pushing you on price, pushing you on the contract detail and criteria. It gets tough, Jason. And then rejection all the time. Rejection. I tell anybody, if you want to learn sales, do a door-to-door sales process for a while. You learn to deal with rejection very, very easy. Or the people, Jason, you see in the streets for all the charitable organizations asking you to sign up. I wish I did that as a kid, as a younger person, because they're great skills that these people are learning, and they're doing it for a good cause too. You can't get a better training ground. Or the electrical or utility providers knocking on your door.
Oh, that's a really tough job. Yeah, it's really
a tough job. Do you know what my toughest job was, Jason? I did canvassing with a colleague of, like, a friend of mine who was going into, well, she was in politics, but she was looking to canvass in her area to get on the elect. And that was really tough, Jason, really challenging. I got absolutely nailed a number of times about, why should we vote for you? You've been terrible in the past. You've never done anything for people like me. And I tell you one, Jason, it was such a learning, and and they were given out to me, Jason, personally, even though I've never met them before. So you have to learn to, like, again, know your strengths and weaknesses in these situations, because my weaknesses, I take things personally. I also think that's a strength, because I make sure I try and look after people. But there's always a double-edged sword and two sides to that coin, Jason. What is your superpower in one situation is a weakness in another. And you have to be mindful of these things. So you then, because when you get screamed and shouted at multiple times in a row, 3 doors in a row, Jason, you have to take a breather and go, okay, bring myself back into the situation.
You go, hang on a minute. There's something not quite right here. That's why I think as a young age, is the kids that knock on the door said, I'm doing a sponsorship. What I do is I they knock on the door, I obviously slam the door in their face. No, I'm only kidding. What I do is they knock on the door and they give me a pitch and I go, that was great. Here's what you could do better next time. I think that's really good, but I'd love you to do like that for next time, because they're going up and down these streets and they're getting slammed. I know you see the kid and you want to sponsor them and you want to, but I can see them door to door. If they don't give me a good pitch, I go, do that again, but next time do it like this, and next time do it like this. And then I close the door on them and then away they go. But at that age, it's a learning cycle, but it's also a lot of resilience at that age as well, because they're knocking on the door and they're hoping that everyone comes along. But learning those practical tools and processes at a young age. But once you get older, and I think, like, I spent years and years and years canvassing, door knocking, doing this, that, and the other for the product or service that I sold in London, and where it's in a really competitive marketplace. That's where it's challenging. That's where you really need to go, well, that was that. Let's move on. That was that. Let's move on. That was that. Let's move on. Like if I got one or two good leads out of that day, or for that particular products and service I was doing, it was getting all the details, getting all the names. And if I could have a conversation with the right people that particular times, then that would have been a result. I think it's all about the small wins. Whatever the small wins might look and feel like along the way, is that person spoke to me, but that's a win. What can I learn from that win to improve on that win next time? So once you have that self gratification, as long as it's realistic, as long as it's grounded in every sort of system that you can think of, but go, yeah, that was good. Bit of gratitude for yourself, bit of self reflection. Go, okay, that was good, but maybe what I can do better next time is that and that and that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jason. And it reminds me of another time when, in my previous company, when I was doing renewable energy, right? I would get a list of all the professional contacts I wanted to get in touch with. So, as you know, Jason, sales, you have your direct customers, and then you have the people who have access to your customers. So, in this case, I was talking to architects and engineering consulting firms, right? So I would get a list of all, I'd create a list of all the people in my area who I could touch and contact. And I would literally Tuesday afternoon for 3 hours, ring, 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 ring. I used to dread it, Jason. So here's this, going back to the self-motivation that you talked about, I had to develop strategies to help me stay motivated. I hated the calls. Like some of them were very difficult calls. And I won't go into the detail, but it was a psychological thing. I was an engineer by trade. Architects are taught in college to look down on engineers, so they're good at leading, because an engineer will always tell an architect, you can't do that. The mechanics do not make sense. And you have to say to the engineer, I don't care. You need to figure it out.
Yeah.
If you start listening to the maths, then your creativity will be misguided, and you'll never be able to do things you creatively can, right? So there's good reason for it. But sometimes they've gone too far and they just talk down to you. So I used to get a lot of talking down to. So what I learned, Jason, over a period of time, when I started to actually have a really good waterfall and get sales, and knew my pipeline, my lead conversions, and so forth. So I was able to say to myself, I'm going to make 100 calls. And when I broke down what that 100 calls would mean to me in business, I was saying every call is worth €1,000.
Yeah.
So, and by the time I make the 100 calls, I've got my €100,000, right? So that's the way I was saying. Every time I made a call, I've just banked 100, like €1,000. And that was that was one of the self-motivating strategies I used to keep me going, because it was tough. It was really tough. Rejection is real, Jason. We're human beings.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's abuse that comes with rejection. Sometimes mostly unfounded. Maybe the odd time you just had a bad call and you lost your temper, right? But again, that's the self-regulation part. But the motivation, how do you keep going in the face of rejection?
Yeah, but that's it. It is that resilience. But that, I think it's a learned behavior, something that you're either good at it or you're not so good at it. But in sales, you need to have that bounce back. You need to know what is right to just go up yourself. Sometimes you might just be in a bad mood. Whatever that bad move actually might be, is to take yourself out of the situation. If you're on the phone and you're picking up the phone, take yourself away from the situation. Do something else for the moment until you can get yourself back on track and the energy's flowing and you feel a bit better about yourself. Because it does. Like I take myself off into the woods or near me, go for a walk, do something, come back, get a coffee, think about the situation, get your posture, get your tone, visualize, do whatever you need to do, get yourself back on track, get yourself back on the horse, and then back at it again. Because if you don't make money, you're not going to live. That's one of the core things about being in sales. The way I've always, and the way I teach people is, this is your own business. Run it as your own business. I know you might have the luxury of a nice basic salary and this, that, and the other, but fundamentally, this is you. This is your own business. This is your own personal brand. And I know we've spoken about that before, but I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Jason. But even like going to when you're talking to customers, right? Like especially big meetings, like when I go into big presentations, especially if I'm doing a proposal for a new concept or something I recommend they should consider, right? I have to then I always do what's called the Murphy law effect of questions and resistance I can get, and even the rejection, the personal rejection to why should we listen to you. I would build a list of all those questions of all. I try and do my research on the stakeholders that are going to be there
Mhm.
and figure out, well, why will they resist? Why will they not like it from their perspective? And that's the social awareness. That's the like having awareness of their personal situation, Jason. And when I do come to a conclusion, I think there's three of or four of these maybe potential detractors from what I want to do. I try and see, well, what can I give them? How can I tweak my
Mm.
presentation to show there's something in it for them, right? Or do you know what I mean? So even and sometimes I may want to engage with them or say something to create a little bit of a situation that I can answer and develop something. I may want to bring up a subject, so I
Mm.
will make the journey go that direction, right? But this is all about having that awareness to yourself, to the people that you are your audience, so then you can work together, get all the information from their side, your side, so then you have the information to make that decision. And again, the regulation for both parties to ensure, and you have to lead that, Jason. They can do what
Mm.
they want. They're the prospect. You have to lead and overcome anything. Otherwise, you could lose them.
I was going to say, while you was saying that, I was thinking about your communication, but it's also about empathy as well, and that is understanding self. But also, once you understand yourself, you should be able to understand others better,
Hmm?
because you're looking at the body language, you're looking at how they are and how they feel, and how they feel about your situation that you're actually in. That's all empathy. That's all about emotional intelligence. Got Nuno come. He's asking what emotional traits are important for sales. Well, Nuno, we've thanks for that. I know Nuno quite well. I'm sure Shay does as
I
well.
do indeed.
Like there's a lot of emotional traits within that, which we pretty much discussed already. So, Shay, you might want to answer that, and then we can have a little discussion
Well,
about that.
emotional traits, like Jason, there's when the word emotional, like traits, one is regulation for
Yeah.
me. It's how do you manage your emotions in a situation, right? And then when I say manage, manage your own, but how
Yeah.
do you lead your prospects or your audience in traits? So for me, the emotional traits are how can you create bonds? How can you create relationships? And how can you ensure the situation keeps within a certain range so it doesn't get out of control? And I always say, if you're the person who's trying to persuade or influence somebody to buy or purchase a service or
Mm.
product, you have to lead that. You have to create the journey. So, but then there's sometimes like Nuno, when you have a situation, you may want to create a bit of tension, right? You may want because you may want to force a situation or a topic or a decision because you may be in a situation where people on the other side can't agree between themselves. So you may have to enforce that. So it's
Mm.
important to know which ones are the right for every situation. But for me, when you say emotional traits, one is obviously empathy, but I think traits, I don't know if it's a trait, it's control, regulation. How do you manage yourself and lead them? And that's not a sort of a linear path. It depends on the situation. I hope that answers your question,
Yeah, I think that's all about that. It's also trust and connection and building that relationship, but it's also rapport, similarities. And now it's not emotional. People like themselves and they connect with.
Mm,
So there was a lot of cortisol in there, a lot of serotonin, a lot of brain juices actually happening at the same time. But we are all emotional traits. So our limbic system, which is the area that covers the emotions and how we can connect auditory, kinesthetic in those areas. And I say, if you want to build a little bit of stress, and as you rightly say, stress. Sometimes stress, you need a little bit of stress because it helps you think a little bit better. in a situation. So a little bit of stress here and there is actually good for you, but it's also good for the other person as well, to help them make a decision and make the decision in the right way, so they think of the idea and it is the right idea that they're impressed with you. Look, I think we're coming up towards the end of our show today. So a quick review of maybe the 3 E's of emotion awareness, self-regulation, and empathy. So your stress management, how do you understand yourself and recognizing, escaping limiting beliefs? Because it is, and it can be a limiting belief that you're not good enough because you've been said no so many times. And then embrace failure to understand feedback. And Shay, what about yourself?
Well, I totally agree with your embrace failure and feedback, because Jason, we've always talked, everything you do is feedback. You have to keep learning. But if you're talking on the emotional side, I really believe you need to first understand yourself and regulate that. You need to manage yourself, lead your prospects, and lead the situation, Jason, to ensure. And the goal is to not to manipulate, to influence, so you can walk away from that meeting, as I said earlier, knowing you did everything you needed to do in the way you should have done it. And that, to me, is the key. If that's the goal, knowing you can walk away.
Excellent. Next week, we'll be looking at the soft and sift and size to sales, and we'll be looking at the areas of ghosting. Big word at the moment. It's a new word that has been invented. And how do we deal with ghosting? How do we look at ghosting? And how can we work around it? So let's looking forward to speaking about that next week. Have a great week, everyone. Make it count.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks a lot.